David Crisafulli, Laura Gerber, Yolandi Ench, testing 1, 2, 3. Well, today we're here in the far north to listen to the cries for help from a community that is demanding action to address the youth crime crisis. A community that's just had enough of years upon years of broken promises when it comes to healing the youth crime crisis. And I wanted to come here to make sure that I feel what real people are feeling and to listen to their cries for real reform. And I'm determined to make sure that when we go to places and when there are regional sittings of Parliament, that it just doesn't become some sort of sanitised version of life. It's not about what happens in those four walls, it's about what happens on back decks like this. And the stories we've heard today are powerful stories and they're moving stories. People who have had to move their business because of impacts of crime, someone who's been impacted at home and in business, 8 break-ins in a couple of months, brave families who have to fight off attackers in their own home and shield their kids from it. That is not a modern Queensland. Now, we had a little win when the government finally adopted our breach of bail solution, which for 2 years we were told wasn't possible. For 2 years we repeatedly said that that had to be part of the Youth Justice Act, and at the last moment they adopted our amendment word for word. Now, what we need now is the police to embed that, and we need genuine reform of the Youth Justice Act. They are the next 2 steps. And it starts with consequences for actions, putting the rights of people like these victims, putting their rights ahead of the rights of the offenders. We need to unshackle the judiciary, and that means removing this crazy provision of detention being a last resort, and we need to get serious about gold standard early intervention. We also need more police to enact these laws. And the government made a promise to add 1,450 extra police in this term of Parliament. That promise is in tatters. And to see the minister try to crab walk and say, well, we didn't say they'd be actual people, we just said they would be some sort of mythical positions, well, that does no one any good at all. You can't improve what you're not prepared to admit is going wrong. And the commitment is in tatters, and to suggest that it wasn't about real personnel is a dead-set cop-out. And we're not going to take it. Promises that are made need to be delivered. And to know that there are fewer frontline, full-time equivalent police today than 2 years ago sends a shiver up the spine of every person who is the victim of crime. And we are not going away on this. The workforce data has been delayed. It should be out there. That would show the true state of the falling police numbers. But right now you've got laws that were watered down. You've got a generation of repeat offenders who know that their rights outweigh the rights of the victim. And crime is spiralling out of control. Less police, weaker laws. Is there any wonder we're in the middle of the biggest youth crime crisis we have ever seen? Laura.
Yeah, thanks, David. We've heard some heartbreaking stories today, listening to victims of crime here in Cairns. But what really has rung home for me today is that this hasn't happened overnight. This has been 8 years in the making. In 2015, the Palaszczuk Labor government watered down the Youth Justice Act, and that has led to this intergenerational crime in Cairns. It has led to Cairns being a cocktail for crime. And the youth crime crisis, I mean, some of the stories of these people on this deck today, it's really heartbreaking. So what we need to see is we need to see some real reform. We need to see action, not just words. And that looks like, firstly, we've seen that the government has adopted our breach of bail policy, but now we need to see detention as a last resort removed. We know that in 2015, the Palaszczuk Labor government watered down the laws and made detention as a last resort. And we're seeing the effect of that in Cairns today. 8 years now down the track, we have a generation of young offenders that think they're above the law, that are chasing police now, not just the brazenness of it. And hearing the stories of these victims, I mean, we really need this state government to start stepping up and creating some change. We need legislative reform, and it has to start with talking to victims of crime. It has to start on this deck here today.
It was really, really important to me to have David and Laura here today. We've got regional parliament here, and I wanted them to hear from the victims, the people that I'm listening to in our community, the stories that I'm hearing. There is hardly anyone in Cairns who has not been impacted by crime, who has not had a car stolen or knows someone who's had a car stolen, had their home broken into. These crimes, it costs money. It costs us money here in Cairns, which adds to the cost of living. We have women who are sleeping at home alone and people are breaking into their homes. Like, you don't feel safe. And enough is enough. We absolutely must be addressing crime in our community. Cairns has the highest crime rate of any city in Queensland. It is totally unacceptable.
I was going to introduce you to a couple of people who have given their time today. Taryn is the homeowner. Thank you very much, Taryn. And Caroline, we took Caroline's story to the floor of Parliament, and it's a powerful one, and one of the disconnection and financial impacts, but more than that, the emotional impacts as a mum. And I thought both of you might want to come forward and tell your story.
Would you like to go first? Yeah, so I guess we've been impacted as a family quite a few times now over the last probably 2 years. More recently, we had our vehicle stolen, and only 4 days later, I woke up to 2 intruders in our house, totally unrelated to the vehicle being stolen. And yeah, my husband, protecting our family, got into a bit of a scuffle with them, and he got hit over the head with a pair of multi-grips, and I was in the bedroom with my 4 children. I've got 4 children under 5, and calling 000. And yeah, it's a pretty scary thing, having your home violated like that and not feeling safe in your own home, for sure. Among a spate of other things, we're small business owners, so that's impacted us as well.
Yeah, so I woke up to the intruder in my kitchen. I woke up and felt something was a little bit off, and I seen some flashing light in my kitchen, and I kind of got up in a bit of a hurry and a kerfuffle, and he ran out on this deck and ran down my stairs and jumped straight into my car. And by the time I realised what had happened, I went to my bedroom window and watched him try and drive my car away, but he didn't know how to drive manual. So then he was struggling to find reverse, he was struggling to find first gear, and I'm just standing at my window in absolute shock, and I just couldn't believe that what I was seeing. I was just couldn't believe that he had the audacity to break through gates and come into my home, into my personal space. And I'm just really grateful that I woke up and witnessed that happening, because if something more sinister had have happened, it scares me to think what could have happened. And I'm very grateful that that's all that did happen, but just wild to think that they're so brazen to just come into our home and just think they have the right to take our belongings and snoop through our things, and just, yeah, nothing happens to them, and we're impacted every day, daily, and yeah, it's just really sad.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anything else for me?
Can we just ask you about the proposed youth jail? Premier announced yesterday, I think it was going to be 35 to 40 beds.
Yeah.
That's that's sort of roughly the third of the facility that currently Cairns kids are flown to, back and forth. What do you think is the scope of that new facility? Is that going to kind of meet the need?
But it's been 12 months and we've seen no planning, no timeline for delivery, and there's no money in the budget. So that's the first glimpse we've had into what this announcement is, and it's been over a year. And increasingly what's making people frustrated is the government makes announcements and then thinks that that's it, job done. And we've seen that with police. We've seen that with police, where commitments were made to increase the number of officers, and in real terms they've gone backwards, and we're halfway through the term. Announcements don't fix problems. Details, delivery, and being able to execute things do. And we just don't have that culture at the moment. There's no accountability for ministers, whether they're building roads, building jails, or building economic narratives. There is no one who is ever held accountable. And if you look at every failure in service delivery, health, housing, law and order, there's a shopping list of them. No one is held accountable. It's like the Premier doesn't have a heart in the job anymore, and Queenslanders are living it. And that's a classic example. They made an announcement because they thought that that was needed as a pressure relief valve, and then that was the first glimpse we've seen of it in a year.
Do you think it should be bigger?
But we've had no details about timelines, money, planning approvals, what the structure will look like, what sort of programs will be done in there. There's no way to run a program. There's no way to run a government. So I'm not going to criticise the project because no one's seen it, and it's not my style to say that everything the government does is wrong. It might be a worthwhile facility, but if there's no money, no planning, no timeline, and no solutions, it's very hard to be positive about things.
Just on other matters, the Premier this morning has announced they'll give $20,000 to anyone who moves to Queensland, to work at Queensland Health, and $70,000 to doctors to move to the regions or remote areas. Do you think that's going to be a fix to the issues we're seeing at the moment?
The greatest gift that a government can give frontline workers is to feel valued, empowered and properly resourced. Now, I'm not going to stand in the way of anything that can attract people to come and serve Queenslanders. I do, however, want to value the ones we've got and make sure that people who do come here feel like they're part of something special and are listened to and are valued. And if you look at the reason why we've got the youth crime crisis we do, for example, the reason why there's less police is we are unable to attract new ones at the rate that the existing ones are walking out the door. And if I speak to people about why they are leaving Queensland Health, it's because they've never felt more under stress, they've never felt less valued. So let's fix the culture. The Minister has previously raised the broken culture in Queensland Health. Well, let's repair that broken culture. Let's put the doctors and nurses back in charge. Let's value them, let's respect them, and then let's make sure that we attract the next generation. That's what a vision for frontline services look like.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks very, very much.